Joining me today. My name is Anna, and today's class is going to be focused on finding some relief for the lower back. So I will be using blocks today, so if you have them, please go ahead, grab them and keep them handy. And if you don't have blocks, that is perfectly fine. We will find some workarounds. So let's get started off on our backs with your feet on the floor and your knees bent. Let's take a moment here just to notice the back of your body. And I want to draw your attention to 3 points of contact. The first being the back of your head, noticing the back of your skull resting on the floor. And if you find that your chin is maybe lifting up a bit, you can always take a block or blanket or pillow and slide it behind your head, so that you can get your neck in more of a neutral position with the back of the head resting easily. And then feel your shoulder blades on your upper back on the floor. And then finally your sacrum, which is the fused part of your lower back, right when it meets the pelvis. And notice the sacrum on the floor. And notice maybe that you can feel both sides of that sacrum, both sides of even your pelvis, level and heavy on the floor. Now let's go ahead and take your hands on front of your pelvis, so on these 2 front pelvic bones here, and we're just going to start to do some tilts in the pelvis. So you can tip the pelvis forward, that's an anterior tilt, where your fingers are moving away from your face. And then a posterior pelvic tilt, where you feel your fingers on those front pelvic bones moving toward your face. So tipping forward, you'll feel your low back come away from the floor. Tipping backward, you'll feel your low back push into the floor. And so neither of these pelvic tilts are necessarily good or bad, but sometimes what can happen is we might be living in an anterior or forward tilted pelvis all the time and not be aware of it. And sometimes that can just start to put a little bit of extra work or strain into the lower back. And so we want to be able to find more of a neutral pelvis and then choose when we want to go into an anterior or a posterior tilt, rather than that just maybe happening without our knowledge of it. And so let's come into neutral here, so we aren't tipped forward and we aren't overly tilted back, but you want to feel your sacrum on the floor, and you want to feel your lower back ribs heavy on the floor as well. And so what I mean by that is, if you're noticing your back ribs wanting to come up away from the floor, right, take those back ribs, push them down into the floor, and you can even have your hands on your front ribs, just giving a gentle pressure down. And so you feel almost this fullness of your back body on the floor. Nice. And then we're going to keep this feeling, having the hands on these front ribs. And let's take a couple of deep breaths. So we're breathing into the ribs, into the hands, and then exhaling, feeling your hands almost come towards each other as the ribs draw back in. Okay. So we'll take a couple more breaths like that, breathing in and out through your nose. And notice that as you do this, that those lower back ribs are not popping up away from the floor, but we're keeping that fullness of the back. Nice. Now we're going to keep that breath going. Bring your hands on top of your thighs. Keep those lower back ribs down into the floor as you lift the glutes up. It's almost like your glutes are your butt muscles, we're gonna lift up into your hands. And you're just feeling that as you do that, we're not letting the ribs come up, but we're holding the front ribs down so that we can start to move in the hips. That's it. Take a couple breaths there. And so we want some activity in the glutes here. You can give them a little poke, but we don't want a ton of gripping here. And then let's reach the arms up like you're holding a tray and give a little stretch to the wrists, pulling your left fingers back. And then switching hands, pulling the right fingers back. Nice. Then you can bring your hands back on top of your thighs. And we're going to super slowly lower top to bottom, one vertebra at a time. That's it. Nice. Okay. And so once again, just feeling the sacrum down on the floor, feel the back ribs down on the floor. Good. And we're just going to bring the right knee up over the hip and set that back down. And then push into that right foot a little, lift the left knee and back down. Good. Push into the left foot a little bit more, lift the right. So just going nice and slow here and making this really intentional. And so what I want you to feel is that that sacrum and those back ribs are staying on the floor here, so that this is just purely a movement in the hip joint and not in the whole pelvis, right? It's not tipping a lot or tilting, but we can hold that stable pelvis and we can hold that support for the lower back as we mobilize in the hips. Perfect. Now the next time you bring your right knee up, hold it here. The right fingers can go into this hip crease, and let's just move this hip in and out a little bit. So this is internally rotated when the thigh rolls in, the foot moves away. Externally rotated when the thigh rolls away and the foot moves in. And then we'll step the right foot back down and lift the left knee. Fingers can go into that hip crease. And let's just move it in and out, internal and external rotation. And so we want to be able to hold some stability in the lower back and move above and below it. So being able to move the hips really well, being able to move in the ribs instead of the poor lower back having to take on all that work. Beautiful. And then let's step this left foot down. So bring your hands back onto your front ribs. And actually, if you have a block, let's take it the thinnest way in between your thighs. And if not, perfectly fine. Or you can also put maybe like a pillow or a ball or something there. So hands are on the ribs, the outer ribs kind of wrapping forward on top. And let's take an inhale breath. Fill up your hands, fill up your ribs with your breath. And then exhale. Feel the sides of the ribs move in and down toward the floor. Inhale, expand. Exhale, draw the ribs in like you're fastening them in front and holding them down. Inhale. Exhale, draw in and down. So keep going with that. And feel that on that exhale, as well as the ribs fastening in, we're also zipping up in the pubic bone. So it's as if everything in this front abdominal wall is drawing in and down. And notice that you can do this just with a sense of ease and softness, that we aren't forcing or gripping. Let's do that one more time. Nice. Now go ahead and take that block from your thighs, and you can roll over to your side here and push yourself up into a tabletop. So we're going to be on our hands and our knees. And feel like you can bring your knees in a little bit closer maybe than you think you need to. So if the knees are too far back, what you're going to feel is that it's really easy to go into this anterior tilt where the pelvis is tipping forward and the ribs are splaying down. So bring the knees in a little bit closer so you can really feel these front ribs holding in without rounding your back, the pubic bone zipping up. Nice. Now, we're going to take your right leg and reach it straight back. So the toes are on the floor. And now take the back of your head, lift it up toward the ceiling without your chin jutting forward. Nice. So we're holding the shoulder blades on your back ribs. We're holding those front ribs in to create that spaciousness in your back body and into the lower back. That right glute is working. And then bring your right knee back underneath you. Now left leg reaches back. Notice we're not letting the pelvis tip forward, so you can even check in with a hand on those lower front ribs. They're holding up without rounding in your back. Back of the head is lifted. That left glute is firm. Nice. Lower the left knee down. Let's do that one more time. So right leg reaches back. And notice here that we can move the leg, we can move in the hip without changing in the pelvis. Lower the right knee back down. Left leg reaches back. Holding that pubic bone zipped up. That's it. And lower your left knee. Great. Okay, so you can keep your toe, or you can have your toes tucked here if that feels okay for you. Now I want you to maintain that same feeling of knitting these front ribs together. And then we're going to move into the hip crease. So you can even put a finger there in your hip creases, really feel where that is. And we're going to take the hip creases back without letting the pelvis tip forward or back. So we're maintaining the length in the spine. You can come forward again. Sit the hip creases back. And so a nice way that you can think about this is if you were holding like a little cherry tomato in this hip crease, in that hip space. And as you move back, you're not going to squash it. So you're holding that hip space as you move back. And this is called hip flexion. And so we can move into hip flexion without letting the ribs thrust, without rounding the back. But sometimes it just takes a little bit more focus, especially if this is maybe a new concept. Nice. Now come back into your tabletop or quadruped. We're going to tuck the toes under. And if you have your blocks handy, you might want to put them underneath your hands. Okay. So the toes are tucked, and that same hip crease space, we're going to lift that straight up for downward facing dog. So as if there was like another set of hands in those hip creases lifting up. And then as you pike the hips up, hold your front ribs in and relax your head. Good. And we'll take a couple deep breaths, breathing into the fullness of your back. Nice. And now let's start to walk the hands back. You can slide your blocks back with you there if you have them. So just until the heels come down. Nice. So the hands will be forward a little bit here. And then take those hip creases and move them back again. You can even have the fingers in those hips. Move them back, but the ribs are in and the spine is long. You can just relax your head. And then fill up your back, the back of the ribs, the sides of the ribs. Fill them up with your breath. Nice. And then you can walk the blocks back a little bit more, and we'll just turn to the left so that we're facing the back of the mat. Good. And so we're sitting back into the hips. The spine is long here. Let's rise to stand just like that. All right, we're getting there. So let's take an inhale. Bring your arms forward and up. And as you do this, notice we're not tilting the pelvis or letting the ribs pop forward, holding the ribs in, and we're just keeping this pelvis in more of a neutral position, not overly tucked back or forward. Okay. As you exhale, keep that feeling as you hinge back into the hip creases, keeping that little cherry tomato in there from getting squished. And let's step the right foot back, lower the knee. You can have the top of the foot on the floor or the toes tucked. Okay. So we have the right hip directly over the knee, and this right glute is working, so it's lengthening down slightly. Now bring your left hand to your lower back ribs and your right hand behind your head. Now take these lower front ribs and pull them back toward your left hand without rounding in your back, and then move the back of your skull into your right hand. That's it. So we're going to take an inhale breath here. Without moving the pelvis, exhale and rotate in your ribs to the left. And that might be a really tiny movement, that's okay. Inhale back through center. Exhale, rotate a little bit to the left. Let's do this one more time. So we're moving in the thoracic spine, we're moving in the rib cage on top of a steady neutral pelvis. Nice. So let's bring your right hand down either to a block or to the floor underneath your right shoulder. And take that left hand to your lower back ribs again and hug the front body up into that. We're going to rotate to the left in the ribs. And then if you want to, you can reach that left arm straight up. So we're securing your right shoulder blade on your back ribs. Your head can release. And then feel like you can breathe into this left lower back space. You can even put your left hand right on this left side of the low back and imagine that you could direct your breath there. That's it. And then we will unwind here. Left hand can come down, floor or block. And we're gonna slide that right foot behind your left. So we're in a crossed ankle forward fold. Nice. And let's just do a little shimmy side to side. Good. And now the left hand stays down, block or floor, and then pick your right elbow up as you rotate your ribs to the right. So we're just working to free up this right side of the low back and down into this right side QL. It can get grumpy for most of us. Nice. And then the right hand can come back down, uncross your ankles, sit back into the hip creases, ribs are in, neck is nice and neutral, back of the neck is lengthening, and then rise to stand just like that. All right, we're gonna do that one more time. So take an inhale, bring your arms up without letting the ribs thrust forward. Exhale, hinge and fold. So we're not letting the ribs pop or the tailbone go up, we're just sitting straight back into the hips. Plant the hands, slide the left foot back, lower the knee. Top of the foot can be down or the toes can be tucked. Feel the left hip directly over the knee, and this left glute is working to help stabilize in the pelvis. Take your right hand to your lower back ribs, left hand behind your head, and then feel the front ribs pull back toward your right hand, and the back of your skull moves into the top hand without letting the chin lift. Let's take an inhale. Exhale, rotate right. It can be a really tiny movement. It's better to move in a smaller way and be clearer about what's supposed to be happening. Exhale, rotate. So we're holding the pelvis steady, neutral, and moving the ribs on top of that. Good. Left hand can lower down block or floor, right underneath your shoulder. You can keep the right hand on the lower back ribs just for a moment here. Lift the front ribs into that as you turn the rib cage to the right. And then maybe the right arm reaches up. Holding the left shoulder blade securely on the back ribs. Maybe the right hand comes to the right side of the low back. And just lifting your breath up into that area. And then bring the right hand back down, block or floor. You're going to slide the left ankle behind your right. And just do a little shimmy with the rib side to side. Just freeing up any of this tissue around the sides of the waist and the low back. Good. And then keep the right hand down. You're going to rotate the ribs to the left. You can pick this left elbow up toward the ceiling. And once again, lift the breath up into that left side of your body. Good. Left hand comes back down. We uncross the ankles, and let's come down to a seat. And then we will lie down on our backs. Have your blocks handy here. So I'm going to take one block behind my head, and then the other block I'm going to take on its highest setting in line with my left hip. And then right knee comes on top of that block. So both knees are bent here. And then you can stack your right hand on top of your left. And then feel just that support of the front ribs hugging in. And take this right hand, sweep it across your chest, and reach it back as much as it feels nice. And then coming back the way you started, stacking the hands, reaching it across the chest, opening as much as it feels good. And so what we're trying to do is minimize movement in the pelvis and the lower back. And that is helped by having that knee on the block. If you don't have a block, you could always just have the knees stacked. And then we're moving in this middle part of the spine. And then as we get ready to switch sides, you can take your left hand to the inside of that right knee and just gently lift it up as you roll to the opposite side. So block on its highest setting, left knee comes onto the block. And then stacking your hands, we'll take the left hand, sweep it across the chest, and reaching back as much as it feels nice. Bringing it back around. Just moving with your breath. Feeling how we're not rotating in the lower back or the neck, but moving in this middle area of the thoracic spine. And then when you're ready to come out of it, just take your right hand to the inside of that left knee, gently lift it up, and we'll come around onto our backs. So setting up in whatever way feels nice for you. I find that if my low back feels a little cranky, just having my feet a little bit wider and letting the knees come in towards each other can feel really nice. But setting up in whatever way feels best for you. If your legs are extended, it can be nice sometimes to put blocks or a pillow or a blanket behind your knees. Taking a few moments to settle. And just bringing some awareness to your breath. And imagining it just filling up this entire core container. Not just moving in the front of your body, but filling up the back, the sides. And that with every exhale, it almost just invites and brings a sense of softness and ease, space. Let your next inhale be a little bit deeper. And your exhale a little slower. And in your own time, let's gently coming back up to a seat. Finding any comfortable seat if you would like to prop yourself up on a block or a blanket. And just feel here at the pelvis in neutral, not overly tipped forward or backward. And the ribs not projected forward or even pushed back and slouchy. And so that you just feel your head directly over the shoulders, directly over the ribs, directly over the pelvis. Everything is stacked and supported and balanced. And so take a moment just to feel the difference in your own body. And just to take that feeling and maybe even some of the ideas that we talked about today into the rest of your day. And just letting them inform the way you sit, the way you stand, the way you move, and the way that you inhabit your body, so that you can feel more free, more spacious, more open. In all of the ways. You did it. Thank you so much for being here with me today and practicing with me. I hope this helped, and I hope your lower back is feeling delicious. I know mine is definitely feeling better. As always, if you enjoyed this class, it helps me out a ton if you would give it a thumbs up and subscribe, turning on notifications so that you do not miss new classes that are getting posted throughout the week. So again, appreciate you being here, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.